So, we're going to start with our opening panel. I'd like to introduce Daryl DeCruz, founder and director of Hexdon, who will be running the session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. So, good morning, everyone. How are we all feeling? All right, coffeeed up, ready to go. So, as Miriam said, I'm Daryl DeCruz. I am going to be moderating this panel and a few sessions throughout the day. This panel in particular is called The Evolution of Consumer Values, Defining the Digital Experience. We're going to do some introductions first. So I am Daryl, as I said, the founder and director of Hexdon. We are a data and insight consultancy, and we help marketing leaders like yourselves to defend your budget and also to chase that increase in revenue. We also help with things like customer centricity and marketing ROI as well. And we operate in the health, wellness, sport and fitness space. So yeah, really interested to crack on with this panel though. We've got some fantastic panelists with us. So let's get started, shall we? Would you like to, Toni, introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Toni Radzihovska. I'm the Global Director of Digital Consumer Products for AbInbev. In the UK, they're known as the Budweiser Group, so any beer that you drink is probably our beer, but I'm on the technology side, and prior to that, I was at Amazon, so happy to take any questions on either.
Brilliant. Over to you, Simon.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. We have to share. Good morning, everybody. I'm Simon Edward. I work for IBM. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer in the UK and Ireland, and have various other roles in Europe and at a global level. Been with IBM quite a long time in lots of different roles. I'm also the client experience leader for IBM across all touch points, so lots of different parts. I think they think I'm not busy enough and keep adding to my role. Probably many of you have got the same, but delighted to be here.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Katie Chung. I'm from Accenture. I'm the Global Marketing Communications Leader for our sustainability services and our corporate sustainability function. I've been with Accenture for 5 years. Accenture is one of the world's largest technology companies with over 700,000 employees worldwide. Prior to working at Accenture, I was a service line leader in the Big Four marketing mergers and acquisitions.
Brilliant. Well, good to have you here. In terms of the structure for this panel, we're going to run for roughly 30 minutes with questions for you guys, and then we'll have some time for questions from you guys out there in the audience as well. So let's get started. The first question is this. How have you seen customer values shift in the last few years, and what have brands had to do to keep up? I feel like I'd like to go for you first, Katie.
Okay, that's great. So I think the first thing that we should probably acknowledge is the dramatic context that most of our consumers exist in right now, whether it's geopolitics, the energy crisis, a food crisis, social impacts, impacts on mental health. We are starting to see a real volatility around customer values. Customer values that may have existed 2 months ago may have shifted. Some of us who retired to bed early last night will have seen dramatic shifts in our own political basis last night. And our customers are really demanding, I think, probably more than ever, and shifting around their values. One of the values that I pick up around customers, and I'm going to come to you two in a minute about some of the predominant values that you see, is around, obviously as a sustainability leader, I absolutely see sustainability as something that people and consumers are focused on. But also the digital age and the technologies that we use right now have really enabled a sense of agency, a sense of ability to express your values, your purpose, and take that into the digital world. And I think that has had a profound impact on the way brands, consumers, and products are evolving. Over to you, Simon. I'm coming this way.
That's right, I'm going this way. So I agree. I think sustainability is something we're seeing all the time. It's interesting that alongside that, there's more of an expectation about diversity and inclusion and I guess looking after people. Outside, I think people care much more about the way the companies care. And I think that what goes with that is authenticity. So if you see lots of press out there, which is all of a sudden negative towards people, if you're not talking about the way you engage, if you're not looking after, it now has a really strong detrimental impact. And many years ago, I think we used to talk about companies owning their brands and managing their brands. I think now with social, with the way people are talking, with the explosion of digital, it's less about just the brands or the owners of the brand managing them, but it's about the way they're treated in the marketplace. So as well as sustainability, which I think is a really important thing that needs to be focused on, I do think that everybody needs to think about what are the policies for the people, how public are they, how do we actually get involved, not just in diversity and ticking boxes, but in genuine inclusion, that we're authentic in terms of what we do. So I'd add that to it in terms of another value that sits alongside it, but I'd probably put the umbrella and say authenticity is critical. So if you're sort of greenwashing for sustainability, it really doesn't go down well, and you get caught out really, really quickly. Toni.
Yeah, just a quick note, but I think you guys got it in that sense. I think of sustainability also as it relates to a person. And we've seen this, the work-life balance has come to the fore, and people are no longer, it's not sustainable for them to go to the office 5 days a week or not go to the office for 5 days a week. So, and back to Katie's point, I think a lot of these values are changing on a monthly, if not a daily time frame. And I think for marketeers and for a lot of people in business, the main thing is, do you have the processes in place that would help you constantly uncover these insights and action them rather than trying to keep with one trend or the other?
I think just adding to that as well, from a values perspective, as human beings, what I'm seeing in my work is the health perspective, the well-being perspective of us as individuals, and having the flexibility, you kind of touched on it as well, in our working lives to be able to put ourselves first as well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think what we've all touched on about is a real focus on human centricity. The needs and wants and of desires of humans right now, clustering around things like wellness, traditional industries being brought together in ecosystems to work on the human challenge of things like wellness or mobility. There seems to be new clustering in my mind around what we as humans and individuals want.
It's an interesting debate, because I sit in a number of sessions, HR sessions, diversity and inclusion sessions, and people talk about time. How do we give people time? And they talk about shortening conference calls. Let's make them 50 minutes instead of an hour, 25 minutes instead of 30 minutes. And I debate and say that's not enough. And what I keep asking for is space, not just time. Because time suggests you've got 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, maybe an hour spare, but that isn't space. And what we need to do is to work out as leaders how we give space to our teams, space to think. Now, space implies there's some time that goes with it, but it also comes with things like permission. It comes with things like the tools to be able to do it. It comes in an environment, as you said, coming back together and having the chance to collaborate. So I'm a big fan of the discussion of space rather than time for our people, so that they really can think.
And what is it that, going back to the question of what do brands have to do to keep up? I think there are some technologies and processes that I'm seeing coming through. So we've obviously been through, the lockdown experience, and a number of organizations are starting to capture the heartbeat of their team. So every day they'll pulse a couple of questions to start tracking what happens there. And of course, we've got the wealth of customer insight through, research techniques to be able to capture that as well. On to our next question. What are your organizations doing to adapt to the multifaceted values and behaviors of your organization, of your customers?
So let me kick off on this one. So interesting, sustainability. I mean, we just spoke about sustainability a massive amount. So I'm not going to talk about sustainability. let me broaden it and talk about ESG and the governance that we've got around some of those environmental and social type policies that we've got. And I think sustainability is part of it, but it's not all of it. And from an IBM point of view, a lot of the discussions that we have is how can we take technology, how can we take skills, how can we help people to make sure they've got access to both, whether or not they're buying it, whether it's pro bono, whether it's donating, whether it's making it available, and then how do we bring that together with people? And a lot of technology organizations are about how do we take technology and replace people. Our approach to this is very much in terms of how do we take technology and make people better. So it's a slightly different approach to some of the areas that get discussed right now, but a lot of the focus is on that side of things. And then if you think about ESG, and in your mind think about that technology and people and ideas and skills coming together, how do we then actually apply that so that we end up in a world that we're going to be happier with and more comfortable with as we go forward? Now, there are lots of examples that I see. There's a project that we got involved in recently, a company called Promar. They effectively build seagoing vessels. and we worked with them to build an autonomous ship. So what's IBM doing building an autonomous ship? Why would we bother doing that? Well, it was a great opportunity to actually test, a bit like Formula One, I guess, tests anti-lock brake systems and some motoring technologies, or maybe e-cars today. It was a chance to actually look and test different technologies. How can a boat sail itself without a captain? How can it at the same time do things like marine research to look at microplastics? By the way, this ship also has a digital tongue, and it actually tastes the seawater as it goes along. And while it's tasting the seawater, it can look for impurities, and it can start thinking about the changes that are happening and the impacts on marine life. So there's a whole research aspect, but that still doesn't answer the question, why does IBM get involved in that? By the way, this ship learns, it had to learn what a seagull looked like so that it didn't bother dodging out of the way. But when it came across a container ship, it had to say, uh-oh, better get out of the way of this, it's a lot bigger than I am. And by the way, it had to learn the maritime law. So it has an AI captain on board, it's powered by solar systems, it's not an IBM product, but it proves so many technology. I think about different industries, and maybe a digital tongue is great, for instance, in the, I don't know, Budweiser industry, that it turns around and it says, I'm looking the wrong way, and it says that, that effectively you could taste stuff and look for impurities and look for quality and test things. So you start to use technologies in other ways. So telling stories around ESG starts to inspire others and starts to actually think about different values in the industry. So much the same as you were discussing sustainability. But you spoke about behaviours as well. So I think behaviours is the other side of things. And the biggest behaviour change that we've seen in the last few years is this explosion of digital. I mean, we were all forced to go digital. We may not have wanted to, but we had to start actually, working from home, consuming from home, ordering from home, doing everything from home. So digital is a massive change. And as we think about digital, and we think about some of the shortages of skills that we've got out there, and we think about also some of the pressures of inflation, then we start using AI, artificial intelligence, more and more. And therefore, as behaviours change, we also need to change in our businesses. So let me stop at that point and see what others have to say about it. So sustainability I'd certainly include, but ESG is the bigger thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And you at IBM, certainly at Accenture, I learn about the amazing things that technology can do every day. It's just absolutely stunning, from AI to VR and the metaverse to digital twins, where we can build a duplicate of a factory and actually test how it might run and operate in a sustainable way. And so I actually think there's a lot of things that businesses can do themselves, and we as marketers and CMOs can influence transformation within businesses to look at their entire value chain, particularly to drive ESG and also to drive sustainability, to think about how they might rethink their products with maybe a circular economy mindset, for example, looking at their manufacturing bases, thinking about the waste in their products. And what that will actually do is actually create relevance with their customers. And you know what, customers, we're all humans, aren't we? We all suffer from quite a human paradox. 1 minute I'll be in favour of something, the next I'm not. I drive electric, but I eat meat. That is the human paradox that we're dealing with as customers today. It's a kind of say-do gap. And I think businesses can take a role in actually sort of becoming defaulted to sustainability. Create the products that are sustainable, people will buy them, and therefore they are sustainable by nature, rather than somewhat wagging our fingers at customers and saying, you need to change. You need to change what you do. You need to change how you behave to become more in tune with the sustainable and the goals around 1.5 degrees that we need. So I think it's just such an interesting time and relationship between business transformation and consumer behaviours. But you must see that as well. Oh, fantastic.
I want to bring us back to kind of the question of how do companies, or how we react as businesses to changing needs and changing behaviors. And I think there's kind of a few things already touched upon. One is obviously being aware of changing technology landscape, the tooling that's available to you. The other one is, of course, skill set. There's a shortage of that one. I was just talking last week to a startup called Open Classrooms, and they do digital skills or upskilling or reskilling, and they have a goal of having 1 million people this year becoming, digital marketeers or systems architects. If they had no previous experience, that doesn't matter. And I think what they do is great in that sense. So skill is kind of number two. on top of technology, but the one we haven't touched upon is actually culture, and I know it's the difficult one to really crack, but you have to think within your teams, within your organizations, how do you incentivize folks to actually react to consumer insights, to actually put them into action? My previous employer, Amazon, you could not get promoted until you've shown that you've actually implemented a few innovations that are based in consumer insight. So kind of thinking about what is the culture around it and how do you motivate people to deliver?
And just one final follow-on point to the digital points that we've all mentioned is, with technology and with data comes great responsibility, because when we participate in that value exchange of our data with an organization, we need to ensure and to understand that there is trust, transparency and traceability in what happens with that data. And that's a very interesting relationship also, and behavioral change that we need to be cognizant of with our customers right now as digital and technology really comes to the fore.
I would say the other thing on that is bias. So fully agree. Traceability, transparency is important, but bias is the other thing. If you rock up to get a new mortgage, loan, whatever it happens to be that you're doing, an AI bot is sitting there making a decision on it, you want to know that it's doing it without bias. It's not making a decision because you look or sound or come from or have a certain background. You want it to be done transparently and without bias. So when you think about AI, I think that's the other aspect I'd add to it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to move the conversation on to a topic that I absolutely love. It's customer loyalty. I mean, we're all customers, we're all loyal to certain brands, but I think we're starting to see more shifts in flexibility in our preferences. So my question to you is, what do brands need to do from a customer loyalty perspective to tackle the economic uncertainty that we're seeing at the moment? And especially, there's in terms of the resulting shifts in consumer habits as well.
I'll start us off for a change. I think loyalty is a difficult concept, especially in these times, because a lot of it is, when we talk about loyalty, we talk about transactional award programs. And don't get me wrong, I love getting discounts and freebies, so I use them, but I have, 40 different airlines and hotels, and I'm a member everywhere, right? How loyal am I to them? I don't know. But then there are certain examples in various industries where you can speak about how, if we talk about loyalty as in this person keeps coming back to me or prioritizing my business first before going somewhere else, kind of two examples that I have. One is, of course, Amazon Prime, one of the biggest loyalty programs in the world that you pay money for, which makes no sense, but I do, because you get a ton of value. Not only, of course, they started with 2-day delivery in the US, 1-day delivery in the UK, but what they keep doing is they keep increasing the value that they give to a loyalty program user. So they keep adding ebooks and videos and, photo storage. Excuse me. And so there's constantly something there of value to me that I can try, even if I don't try all of that. So I think you need to think about who's within your value chain or through partnerships, what sort of other loyalty awards you can provide beyond the discount. Of course, Prime has the discount as well and early access to some of these deals. On the other spectrum of it is Apple, that we all also know, they have no loyalty program, because the way they build loyalty is by creating an amazing hardware product and then an amazing user experience as you go through it. And of course, kind of locking you in because they own parts of the ecosystem, but they provide value for you to stay within that ecosystem. And they don't need a loyalty program or a loyalty manager. I'm not sure they have one.
So it's interesting on the ecosystem piece. So ecosystem to me is critical today. I think if you listen to people and you invite them to come forward and you create with them, then you start to recognize that probably no one company can do everything, and therefore the ecosystem becomes really important. From a marketing point of view, we launched a new brand platform, and its whole premise was on let's create. And the let's was really important because it was about inviting people to come and join in and create, not assuming we knew the answers, inviting customers, inviting partners, inviting people that were out there in terms of just separately and not working with us at all, to just come and create, come and work with us on it, not looking for an immediate economic return, financial return, but create this environment that we all want to be in. So I think the ecosystem piece really resonates in terms of where we go. And it's interesting that the two examples you gave at extremes there, one where you pay to be agree and one where you join it. But the ecosystem around Apple is phenomenal, isn't it? In terms of the way they've invited people to come in and provide the apps and the platform and the environment they're working in.
And again, it's such an interesting question, loyalty. I mean, does it exist today in its form that we've known about it over the last 10 years? And I think about Apple, and I think about love. People love Apple. It's an emotion. It's tapped into something. It's delivering products that emote love. Apple can seemingly, create something that creates a groundswell. But I think also so I think brand love is something that we perhaps are all trying to aspire to. And it just shows you don't need a loyalty program to have love. So that might be the secret sauce that I think Apple have. But I think your other point around ecosystems is connected back to that idea of what does the human, the individual, because we can be seen with the data that's available, we can now be seen as individuals to companies as well. With personas, and customer journeys are not much more fragmented and not quite so linear and as previously. But how can we create ecosystems around your product or your service that serves the human needs, that may be a little bit paradoxical because that's what we're like, but that generate this kind of love? So maybe you go from working or taking a certain product, and then you're enjoying another product that's offered to you in the same ecosystem around that. I mean, take cars, for example, electric cars. There's a lot of ecosystem works in the EV sector. It's not just the manufacturers, but it's the way that the dashboard is created, the technology that's inputted into the car. It's the whole package, and that's what's creating love. And it's not that single company, it's the ecosystem that they've created together.
I love the concept. I love the concept of love. Do you get brand love in B2B? So it's a lot of the examples there were B2C. So is there brand love? Is there a love in, or is it just procurement? So what's B2B love?
I think B2B love is coming. I think we're
is
in the
it?
early days.
Is that in the room across the way later on today?
Yes, that's another breakout.
Exactly.
But I think it is possible.
Change the agenda quick.
I do think it could and should be possible that if you are serving your clients in the B2B world, that they just love, people matter in B2B. I love working with you. These are the kind of expressions that we say. I love working with that consultant. I love working with you. I love your brand. I love your boldness. So yeah, I do think love happens.
People love working.
They might love the technologies. I love that technology. I love the way you implemented that on that boat. It's an emotion, and I think we're all, our emotions, as I said, that agency that we're all feeling with technology allows emotions to actually play a much higher part in our decision making.
There's a rational part to it as well, though, isn't there? Because of course, brand love is a great way of measuring loyalty as well. But when you think about, we all go to the supermarket to buy food, right? We're being, based on the cost of living crisis happening at the moment, we're being challenged around the cost of food. So what's happening? We're seeing more of the premium shoppers going towards Aldi and so on and so forth. So there's a whole value piece there, I think, and perception of value as well that's really interesting.
I mean, that is going to be particularly interesting right now, is the sort of cost consciousness that people are going to move into, is where does love factor in a choice between, as we all hear, heating and eating. But I think there are some products, maybe Apple is one of them, that extends beyond that, and the desirability is still there even though there's cost consciousness.
And I think for us in marketing there's a challenge, because there will be some people in whatever industry we're in, whether it's B2B or a consumer industry, where buyers will come out of the market for a time. So maybe the universe we're selling to is 100%, but actually at any one time only 10% are buying. But we market to everybody so that we're there, we're in front of them, we're ready for the point at which they make a decision, rather than trying to guess who's doing it. But all of a sudden that 10% might become 5% or 1% that's buying. And that's the challenge, I think, on all of us, and how we use intelligence and loyalty to go back out and actually have the conversations to the whole market, knowing that only maybe now 5% are in a buying mode at any one time. And how do you prioritise that when maybe budgets that we've also got start becoming prioritised within the business under the same monetary constraints that we're seeing in the market? So I think there's some times there that start calling for intelligence and focus and prioritisation and real intimacy with the different buying people, buying personas, whether it's B2B and mixed, or whether it's consumer and an individual and the emotional buy.
Brilliant. Talk to us about how technology is driving the ever-increasing digitization of the customer journey. And if you have a great case study or a use case you can touch on, we'd love to hear that.
I can start this from kind of my example. I was thinking about still on the topic of love and kind of brand loyalty. So I'm gonna say exactly. But coming to beer, I've seen this within kind of my business. It's a person who drinks Stella Artois and a person who drinks Budweiser. They will never switch because they are fiercely loyal to the brand that they are consuming, which is great for us, of course. Not great if they kind of try something from a competitor's side, but they tend to stick with you and tend to stick with the brand. But the story I wanted to talk about was slightly on a different angle, which relates to a lot of our customers, versus consumers. So our customers are actually wholesalers or hospitality, because they are the people who actually sell beer to the end consumer. And what we've gone through during pandemic times, we had this idea that was completely pooped on by a lot of people in the organization, to be honest, that actually we need to build an app where people, wholesalers, can buy beer from us directly, which sounds very logical. But it was never done before, because you would always have somebody going in there, business development representative, talking to that person. They've built a relationship over years. But it was insanely quick for people and insanely easy. And we built a small prototype and we kind of sent it into the world. And people from kind of mom and pop shops to big retailers said, oh my God, this makes our life so much easier. We don't need this person to come in anymore, right? So, and it's called Bees. If you ever look up, big success story at this point, because now it's been operating for over 3 years. But as you build this very simple MVP, then you realize, okay, it's not just about ordering, because they also need invoicing, they also need kind of website tools, they also need things like, AI we've built into it, because then now you can suggest what sort of product mix based on seasonality, based on previous purchases that mom and pop shop need to carry. And that's kind of one of the success stories that nobody believed in, but actually a huge cost saving for us, and it's a direct line to customers who can give us feedback as well on what's selling well or not, even in such a traditional industry as beer industry.
So that's why I chip in one and say smarter experiences is where I come in. And there are lots of examples, but one that springs to mind recently is working with a car manufacturer. And obviously a car manufacturer has most of the relationship with dealers that they sell to, but effectively it's the end users that use the car. So transcending through the dealer to make sure the information's there, and with connected vehicles now, there's much more information available. So making sure that information can be translated into something that adds value. Not something that's creepy that says you've been speeding, but something that actually helps somebody avoid issues with the car, or actually get stuff done, or have a better service or a better experience, or think about their next car. So I think smarter experiences, and I think your example is a great example of a smarter experience in terms of ordering beer. So I think there's a real drive for that.
Yeah, I think it largely comes back to whatever the technology, the data that can be brought into the organisation, the analysis and insights that can be driven from that organisation. And to be frank, not every organisation is equipped to handle that kind of information. Do they have the right systems in place to capture as much information that they want from their digital platforms? It's not probably as prevalent as we think, that as marketers we have that data that enables us to look at our customers in a very detailed way within every organisation, large through small. But I really do think it is looking at that data, the value of that data, the transparency of that data with your customer. I mean, I think maybe we've all seen the advert for a company where you get a watch if you sign up to a product. The value of the data that the company probably gets from that watch is tremendous. Do you know the value of your own data? I'm sure it exceeds the value of the watch. So I think there's just a really interesting relationship between the data that we have as marketers, how we use it, how we communicate what we're doing with that data to our customers as well. So a lot of it is actually not always in the front-end customer experience through the app or the portal or the website or whatever your go-to-market channel is. Some of it is actually the back end, what happens, and the responsibility that we have on the back end.
Yeah. For me, one use case that really stands out is the last mile delivery of supermarket shopping. So I shopped a couple of days ago on an app called Gorillas. in London, and literally within 12 minutes from placing the order, I had a guy at my door with a bag of all the things I wanted. So that was my breakfast sorted. But I think in terms of digitizing the experience, that was so seamless and so effective. And there's going to be so many more of those examples as we move
Magic.
forward.
They're losing money, though, you know.
Well, there you go.
No, there's a tricky balance, you know, between, you know, how do you still deliver the consumer value of 12 minutes and make it a viable business, of course. But yeah, and I'm afraid to open my Audi app because now I have a smart plug. What is it going to tell me? But you're right, yeah. There's certainly
value.
value.
It was Audi that was the example, by the way. Not that I mention any names.
Brilliant. Well, we're progressing well in terms of time. So we'll finish off on this one for you guys. Given the topic today on consumer values and digital experience, what's next for your organizations?
Well, I think for my organisation, I think I'm going to, think about this more broadly than just my organisation, which has many, many clients in all industries and sectors. So it would be hard to pinpoint. I think one of the areas that we're very interested in and looking closely at is VR and the metaverse and the experience of customers within that space. And there are a number. It's interesting to see a number of high-end luxury brands already experimenting with product sales within this virtual environment. I've also think that actually there's a generational readiness. I sort of asked my daughter, at Christmas, what does she want? I want a Roblox credit. She's already buying something in, or in I forgot what it's called, but there's the other game where they're buying clothes or buying hairstyles. It's already happening to a certain extent with a generation away from being our buyers. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I would say automation. I think there's a huge demand right now for people to automate stuff, whether it's through AI, whether it's through robotics. There are pressures on us in terms of skills. There aren't enough people around. The skills aren't there. And at the same time, I think the demands that we have grown. You want it in 12 minutes. The person next door wants it in 8 minutes. So they go get a monkey instead of a gorilla or whatever it happens to be. But but I think the demands are massive right now and the expectations are high, and we just can't afford to deliver. So automation is going to be a very big thing for us as an organisation, for our industry, and I think for the world in general. It's the only way to think about some of the inflationary pressures as well to keep prices down. Otherwise, stuff becomes unaffordable. But with that comes great responsibility, because as you start to use, and we discussed AI and spoke about some of the challenges, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way if we are automating, and we need to make sure we skill up, and we need to make sure that we avoid bias. Otherwise, we end up with systemic issues. So automation for me is the really big thing that we've got to get into, and we need to get into it really quickly. And there's a role for it in thinking just about every industry.
Got one. Sorry. I think for us as a very traditional CPG company, I think it's scaling the technology that we have, that we've explored. I gave an example of BZAP. It's also looking at areas where there are seeds of innovation and making calls on it. It's hard because you always have to say, out of these 10 brilliant ideas, actually we're going to drop 8. And we're going to continue with these 2 because you always have budgets and headcount and people who actually need to deliver this. So it's scaling efficiently and kind of using the technology for the consumers and the customers that we have in our value chain, and even in engaging our partners. The BZAP that I mentioned, one of the debates we're having is, should we make it into a marketplace app rather than our app? Procter & Gamble can sell through us to the retailer, or PepsiCo, or whoever else is there that engages with them on a daily basis. So that's kind of our challenge.
Through my business Hexdon, we are talking to a number of sports tech organizations. And if you think of an example in terms of running marathons, there's a whole experience that can be created around, okay, I don't run marathons, I run 10Ks, but I've got to get to that 42.2 kilometers. What do I need for that? I need all the data I can capture around my nutrition, my workouts, my sleep. And when you put all that together into an ecosystem, there are a couple of things that can happen. You can have partners that can come in and support you from that perspective, the brands, but then also your family around you in terms of values, and your friends can support you from that perspective as well. So there's a real interesting lifestyle type enmeshment of data and insight that can really help us to drive the goals in that particular example. I'm going to open up questions for you guys in the audience over here. There's a question over here already. Do we have a mic?
I've got one.
I just raise my voice.
Sure.
I want to ask, we've been hearing about this both with a huge tongue and apps and automatization. So how do you deal with the concerns on how these new technologies, particularly AI, will affect the workforce? And this might be a concern for your customers, consumers, communities, employees. So how do you manage that?
So from our point of view, I mentioned the fact that from an IBM point of view, we don't look at technology replacing people. We look at technology making people better. And that's very much the ploy that we take in terms of when we create solutions and work on stuff. There aren't enough people to be able to deliver the response and the experience that currently we're looking for. If we don't look at a way to scale it, to personalize it, and to make people better, then we'll never deliver it. So if you take something like AI, and we've been doing work, for instance, in medical research, there's no doctor in the world who can read every piece of research in the world, who can read and keep up with the paper, because doctors have to sleep. They don't read every language. They can't travel everywhere. They go on holiday. They have a bath and go to the toilet. You know, there's not time to do it. Whereas technology can. Technology can ingest that information. And it means when a doctor is looking at it and seeing a patient and seeing symptoms they don't recognize, they've got access to a body of work across the world. So we very much look at it and say that technology is there to make the human better, not to replace the human. And that's very much an approach that we've taken through AI, through technology in terms of delivering it. And I think what we see now with the skills challenges and the resource challenge is that now comes to life en masse, because we have to work out a way to serve our clients, but we can't just throw warm bodies at it. We can't afford it, and by the way, we can't find them.
Well, I can continue on that one. It's also about, it's that first line of defense and the amount of work that the frontline personnel has to do, where AI can really help. And I'm sure you guys have looked at, you open up a banking website, and the first thing, there will be Carrie or John, an AI assistant helping you. They are extremely annoying because they never get, the more complicated questions right. But what they do get is they take the load off the people in the front line who have to answer the same question over and over again, which is usually, top 5 questions is like the 80% of their questions anyway to any call center. So you actually, I'm going to argue that you actually have people who are grateful that they don't have to do this menial task anymore, and because we're now in our second, third, whatever it is, industrial revolution, similarly, but not through machines, but through computing power.
I guess, if we step to the back end, you can use AI and machine learning in the sort of manufacturing and production process to create greater efficiencies, to enhance the product in the factory, etc. as well. So, and again, it can change jobs. We can create new skills. Green jobs, again, is something that I think about quite a lot. But skills and jobs are fundamentally changing with the technology and being created by the technology as well. So things are changing. I think also an example from my organization around not AI, but again back in the metaverse, was that during the pandemic we onboarded, I think it was up to 100,000 people via Oculus headsets. And they went and joined a community online, the nth floor as we call it, and they had an experience with their fellow employees. And it was actually something that brought people together in a kind of community which otherwise they might not have experienced. So I think there's lots of positives.
It's actually a really good story in terms of bringing people on board. I think as we open up these new jobs, we as large organisations, and I know you do the same for sure, need to go to the market, and you mentioned it on skills as well, and make sure that we're training up the next generation. And I think there is a responsibility. So there are lots of programs around. We have something called Skills Build, which is a free platform for people who maybe don't have access to build skills. And I think if people build the skills, then those new types of jobs open up. So I don't think the technology should be seen as a threat. I think it's an opportunity to remove some of the boring tasks. We need to make sure that we've got people who are ready for those new roles as they come up through academia into the working environment.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience? We have one over here.
I need to think a bit because I'm wondering whether I'm kind of making a statement rather than asking a question. So I'll start and we'll see how we get on.
We can get another chair up here.
vulnerable consumers and consumers who, for whatever reasons, could now be less protected, as it were. So I work in financial services, and so with a sort of explosion of fintech services and so on, there has been a clear need for the regulators to step in to ensure that vulnerable consumers are not being taken advantage of. So I'm trying to get to my question, and I kind of lost my way a little bit. But I think as a marketeer and a communications person, I feel an enormous sense of responsibility for these consumers who, for whatever reason, may not have the protection that they would necessarily do. I've got a Klarna app, for example, whereby buy this, buy that, you know, and it's there. And I'm still trying to think what my question is. But how can we together, I guess collectively as an industry, ensure that we are, despite all the advantages, doing what we need to do to safeguard and protect those consumers who are vulnerable? Does that make sense? Is that a question?
It does make sense, and I think unfortunately there are people who are more vulnerable, but I think everybody's vulnerable. How many phishing things have people had? How many texts have you had saying get your tax rebate? How many people have phoned to say here's the money back for your central heating refund now because you need to go and click on it and give us your bank details? There's so much going on right now. It's really difficult. I think part of it is education. For those people who you can work with and educate. I sit on a charity that is for people, we call them learners, but young adults and older adults who have learning difficulties, and it is very worrying. And in all honesty, I'm not sure I've got a magic answer to it. I think we rely on authentic brands who take a responsible attitude, but not everybody does that, and we see that with some of the security issues today. So you can put in as many safeguards as we can put in place, and then hope that people actually behave in a human way. Not everyone does. It's a very difficult question.
It is a very difficult question, and I don't think it's, as per your example, it's not limited to, for example, financial services customers or the vulnerable. It also extends to youth and children who are vulnerable and susceptible to coercive behaviours or experiences online. And I think the role of business, it is really challenging, but it comes back to education, to transparency. But again, I'm with you. It's a really, really tough question. I can see why it takes a while to frame. It's education, and maybe that starts young and it carries on throughout the life.
Certainly, and kind of the thing that I was also thinking, yes, there's a role of government, there's a lot of legislation around digital acts and kind of how we protect folks from malfeasance, but there's also a thing that we can do as marketeers, and kind of two things I'm thinking. One is there's quite a few industry initiatives that you could be part of. There's a lot around AI ethics and which companies participate on that, how you use AI ethically. There's also, I think we are in a very envious position versus other folks in the business, because as marketeers we always have been trained to put the user first, or to put the customer first. So kind of keep it at the forefront of your mind. Am I missing somebody when I'm doing this product or when I'm making this campaign? Other people who may be having difficulties understanding what I'm saying. What is this person? What they struggle with, and I think we need to teach our organizations about kind of consumers first and users first, and then we decide what we do in terms of technology.
I was just going to add, I think you touched on it at the very beginning. It's your purpose. It's brand's purpose beyond the price tag, and having to align yourself with a right-minded purpose, because consumers are going to only go to brands that actually are attracted to their values and what they believe in. Yeah. So finding education or charities or something that actually can do what you're trying to do better, but you're aligned with them and pointing them to the right way for teaching and services and whatnot.
I feel like it's come back, full circle to where you started, and about inclusion and diversity, and it's a lot more on the inclusion. Our role as marketers to be thinking about everything we do. What are the different user types? What are their challenges? Neurodiversity, and addressing that. Thinking about that up front, not as an afterthought. So again, I do think it's come back full circle to you.
And I would say alongside that, it's also allyship. It's the human part, which is, are we willing to speak up when we see something that doesn't look right, doesn't work right, where somebody's not treated right? And I think that's on all of us. It's on everybody, and that is education as well. So allyship, being brave at times and coming forward and actually standing up for somebody, whatever the issue happens to be, whatever the inequity is actually being called out, whether it's somebody that has some sort of learning difficulties or maybe a hidden disability, but speaking up is really important.
That's such a beautiful point. I think the only thing I would add is there are organisations out there that can sort of shine the light on this topic. So the Data and Marketing Association, the DMA, they have a code of conduct. And if you want to seek more information about it, they are there to help with questions like this as well. But yeah, I really like that final point. It's a nice way to close it up. Thank you very much to you guys on the panel, and thank you for your questions as well. I think we're at a point we're going to wrap up. So yeah, thank you.